Marduk was an all-powerful god, the king of the gods, who presided over justice, healing, magic, and
black metal.
Yes, today we are ranking the albums of Marduk, and we're starting with Dark Endless in 1992. Love that creepy little string and piano intro, very much your typical debut black metal record from the early second wave, in that the bones are here, but you can also hear the band really trying to feel out what they want to do. That first track alone has such an identity crisis, and don't get me wrong, some of the places it goes is pretty cool, but taken as a whole, it's a bit of a mess. That said, I like the production here, handled by the legendary Dan Swano. It's got that raw edge of the era, but not to an off-putting degree. You can actually hear all the instruments. The drums in particular have that great echoing, cavernous quality to them. This is the only album with Andreas Axelsson on lead vocals, with drummer and future lead vocalist Joachim doing backups. Some pretty solid earworm riffs on here too. Honestly, in spite of its faults, this is a really solid start. Better than some, not the best either. I actually did a ranking of black metal debut albums if you want to check that out, but on here, I'm going to go ahead and put this at great tier. Next up is Those of the Unlight in 1993. Legendary album, and probably my favorite album art from their entire catalog. They remind me of the Ring Wraiths. Joachim taking over on lead vocals here, sounding as evil as they come, with Dan Swano producing once more, and once again the drum sound is a highlight for me. Songs feel much tighter and more focused. The guitar melodies are super menacing, with the dual attack of Morgan and Devo giving tracks like Wolves an unmatched malevolence. I also love all the little pace changes to keep you on your toes, like on the title track and on Darkened Wings. Cool bass part on the latter too. A Sculpture of the Night is great, and then also pulling in those ambient elements for the sorrowful echoes from the past. Not my favorite, but a total classic and one of their best overall. I'm putting it at perfection. They followed that up with Opus Nocturn in 1994. Dan's production here is a little uglier, but with everything still coming through, and the reverb on the vocals is the perfect touch that just further elevates the amazing atmosphere, which in my opinion nearly reaches Emperor levels. It takes the dark melodies of the previous album and then cranks up the RPMs with those hyperspeed blast beats courtesy of Friedrich Anderson. Sulphur Souls is a great opener. From Subterranean Throne Profound always keeps you on your toes with the more crazy shifts in rhythms. Those tremolo lines on Autumnal Reaper never failed to get my motor running, while alternatively Materialized in Stone has a seriously infectious folky swing to it. And then The Sun Has Failed is a demolishing closer. If you ask me, as far as the classics go, this is the best early Marduk album, even more so than Those of the Unlight.
Fight me.
Also one of my favorite early second wave albums in general. It's going to the top of perfection. Next up is Heaven Shall Burn, When We Are Gathered in 1996. The first album with Legion taking over on vocals and Hypocrisy's Peter Tegtrin taking over on mixing. Still a somewhat similar vibe to the last few albums, but I'm not as big a fan of the production here, and the songwriting just doesn't feel quite as strong. Pretty by-the-numbers black metal album in my opinion. I was interested to see that it was rated slightly higher than Opus Nocturne on Metal Storm by the fans, because to me this is easily a few steps down from that. I do like Glorification of the Black God, which has melodies and direct samples from the classical arrangement Night on Bald Mountain. The rest feels a bit too focused on atmosphere and not enough on really memorable melodies and hooks. Like Darkness It Shall Be, for example, is just straight up annoying in my opinion. Not terrible by any means, but not great either, so I'm gonna put it at good tier. Next up is Nightwing in 1998. The theme of this album is blood, beginning a blood, fire, and death trilogy as a tribute to Bathory. Once more digging the atmosphere, bringing this great sense of dark malevolence with blizzard-like riffs. The production unfortunately feels like another step down in some ways, but the songwriting is way better in my opinion. Kicking off strong with Blood Tide XXX and Of Hell's Fire. Slay the Nazarene may be my favorite on this one. Love the opening sample from The Wicker Man. It loses me a little bit in the second half, getting kind of bland and repetitive, but overall I quite enjoy this one. I'm going to put it at great tier. Next up is Panzer Division Marduk in 1999. Continuing that trilogy with the theme of fire in the form of war, and this definitely aided by the mixing, giving it a more stripped back sound with less atmosphere, but the guitars coming through blazing like machine gun fire. Notably, this album is no longer available on Spotify just of last year. Great title track for the opener to really set that bleak battlefield tone, followed up perfectly by Baptism by Fire. Christ-raping black metal has a great ominous melody. It could use a little more variety, but like the tank on the cover, it's very to the point, blunt force aggression over 30 minutes. I'm going to put this one at fantastic, probably my favorite of the Legion era. Then we have La Grande Danse Macabre in 2001. Finishing out that trilogy with Death. And in spite of the whimsical title, this album is very tedious in my opinion. It's definitely very plotting, kind of aimless in my opinion with the compositions that just bore me to tears. If you like doom metal, you'll probably like this one more, and I think that fits the Death themes, but I don't know, it just doesn't really do it for me. You'd think at least tracks with names like Funeral Bitch and Death Sex Ejaculation would be fun, but they still manage to be completely forgettable. Yeah, I'm gonna put this one at okay tier.
Dull.
Then they followed that up with World Funeral in 2003. Bit of a more dynamic album here, mixing faster and slower tracks. I appreciate the varied pacing, but I don't really find these songs to be all that engaging either. There are some moments here and there, like that dramatic section later in Night of the Long Knives and the brass outro of Black Crowned, but nothing to write home about, really, in my opinion. This is also the last album with Legion. I'm going to put it at good tier. Then we got Plague Angel in 2004. Mortuus stepping in on vocals, and he slides in just fine. Unfortunately, again, the songs themselves are just not really doing it for me yet. It almost feels like we're slipping backwards in time here due to the production and the songwriting, possibly due to former guitarist, now bassist Devo handling mixing instead of Peter Tategren. Once more, it feels a little bit directionless to me. There's some cool atmosphere on tracks like Perish in Flames and another brass section on Death March, but it's just not enough to keep me interested. Just feeling kind of uninspired. This is another one that landed at okay tier for me. But then we got ROM 512 in 2007. Now this feels like something. The opening track, The Leveling Dust, has a much more distinct personality to it that has been so severely lacking over the last couple albums. And once more, improved production. I can even actually hear the jangle of the bass strings on this one. Mortuus seeming more comfortable doing his own thing here too, with some weirdness that reminds me a bit of Attila from Mayhem. Great use of ambient atmosphere while still putting more focus into memorable riffs and better pacing. Cold Mouth Prayer is pure raging hellfire, while alternatively Imagi Mortis has a more mournful vibe. 1651 makes for a cool dramatic orchestral centerpiece. Also some cool guest features on here, maybe just a touch long, but definitely one of their strongest efforts overall. Probably my favorite from the Mortuus era. I'm putting this one at perfection.
Finally!
Next up is Wormwood in 2009. Picking up on a pretty similar note here with another strong opener and Nowhere, No One, Nothing. Love the bass on this track. Great hypnotic sway and eerie atmosphere on Funeral Dawn. A lot of this album feels like we're conjuring evil spirits. Definitely get that vibe on Unclosing the Curse. But there are also still some ripping blast beat driven moments as well, like Into Utter Madness. And As a Garment makes for another great closer with that driving bass line. Another really strong album that really gives you something to chew on as a complete work. Again, it could benefit from a little trimming, especially in the second half, but overall, I really like this one as well. It's going to fantastic. Serpent Sermon 2012. Keeping a similar energy going into this one, although I'd say that comparatively it feels a bit more straightforward, but still plenty of ups and downs. Messianic Pestilence is a rager. Into Second Death has some killer drumming. Same goes for Mammon and the Hypnotic Temple of Decay. Damnation Gold really keeps things interesting with all the pace changes shifting between blast beat fest and atmosphere. Another very solid entry for my personal taste. This one is also going to Fantastic. Then we have Frontschwein in 2015. Right from the top, this one feels like another stylistic shift when compared to the last three. Much more stripped back sound that seems to be getting back to basics. Tracks like The Blonde Beast have this more simplified but head bob inducing approach, but there's still some atmosphere to be found on tracks like the ensorceling War the Land and doomy Nebelwerfer and 503. But really most of this is focused on an adherence to kind of the basic essence of the genre. It's still a solid listen, it just feels a little bit derivative, especially after the more creative touches of the last three records. And given the more formulaic approach, that 55-minute runtime definitely starts to drag. So, dropping down to good tier for this one.
And everything seemed to be going so well.
Next up is Victoria in 2018. Picking up on a similar note here with Werewolf, I do like the touch of the air raid siren. I'd say with both this and the last one, if you prefer your black metal to not stray too far from its roots, you may love these a lot more than I did. Personally, I feel like we've done this style to death and progressed beyond it for a reason. If I want to listen to that classic black metal sound, I just go listen to the classics. So for me, I'm honestly pretty bored for much of this. I at least appreciate that they seem to pick up on the same issue I had with the last one and trim this down to a much more reasonable 33 minutes. Unfortunately, the songs that make up that time are even more bland and forgettable, in my opinion, too. So this one is going to okay tier. And that brings us to Memento Mori in 2013. Joel Lindholm replaced Devo on bass until... Yeah, Devo is back now live and once more handled recording and mixing. That unpleasantness aside, I was very impressed with the lead single Blood of the Funeral, which seemed to be more of a balance between old school and modern sentiment. Love the swelling brass, and the drumming from Simon in particular is ridiculous. Starting up the album though, I was feeling less impressed with the title track, feeling a bit generic compositionally, and the production a little bit flat and compressed. This continues into Heart of the Funeral, with the guitar work feeling pretty uninspired, though I do like that little melodic section. Fortunately, things get a lot more interesting with Shovel Beat Scepter's eerie intro of plodding drums, bells, and snarling vocals opening up into a slow, grimy groove. Then you've got the miserable sounding melodies of Charlatan and punky, shifting rhythms of Marching Bones. Year of the Maggot really keeps you on your toes with one of their most chaotic and unpredictable songs to date, and Red Tree of Blood is just this beautiful, malevolent blizzard punctuated by more subtle brass. Pretty solid closer too with the doomy As We Are. So it's a bit of a slow starter with some production issues and a few more paint-by-numbers sounding tracks, but once it gets into the meat, I really enjoy it. It definitely feels like a step up from the last two, and some real standout moments for Mortuous on this one as well. Right now, I'm feeling like pretty high up on great tier, but I don't know, with time I could see this actually swapping spots with Panzer Division. Y'all check out this playlist for more black metal rankings, and again, let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these albums differently? What are your thoughts on all of them? Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.